Joe Rogan said yesterday, and I quote, Bernie Sanders made a ton of sense to me, and I would 100% vote for him. Now, Joe Rogan has been pretty much tarred in the media over the past couple months, namely what I like to call prestige media, the New York Times, etc., as somehow a platform for the alt-right, or that he's contributed to this scary phenomenon whereby young men mostly are getting radicalized by YouTube personalities who want to give them the red pill, to use that cliche, and send them on this dark journey where they're exploring very dangerous ideas that can lead to them having violent inclinations or hating minorities, whatever. Has Joe Rogan had on his show people who you might consider friendly to the alt-right or even fully alt-right? Sure, the seminal example of that, I guess, is Milo, who appeared on his show in the past, and now is basically nowhere to be found after having a, quote, fall from grace. Now, I know technically Milo is considered alt-light, whatever. The point is that Joe Rogan has had on his show conservatives and people who are in that broader kind of constellation of political figures who get characterized as alt-right, alt-right leaning, alt-right adjacent, whatever the term happens to be. But Joe Rogan is now saying that he would 100% vote for Bernie Sanders, an avowed socialist. I've never heard Joe Rogan say that he would vote for Trump. I've heard him dismiss or dispute some of the more overheated and histrionic criticisms of Trump, which I have also done many times, but I've also never said that I would vote for Trump. I didn't vote for him in 2016. Said I opposed him, frankly, in 2016, and I will not vote for him in 2020. And yet I've also frequently been lumped into the same category of somehow adjacent to people who are Trump supporters or right-wingers, because some of them happen to follow me, some of them interact positively with what I put out online, and they find it refreshing that there's somebody who's not a stalwart partisan Trump supporter who nonetheless can decipher and sift through some of the ridiculous criticisms that are leveled at Trump that actually don't, in any meaningful sense, diminish Trump, and miss the ways in which he is actually doing what you might regard as legitimate harms. So, Joe Rogan obviously has a vastly bigger audience than me, but he's kind of been subjected to the same treatment, in the sense that him merely conversing or engaging with these people means that he gets tarnished as, somehow a member of the alt-right. And I think the fact that he would endorse Bernie Sanders, not an official endorsement, obviously, but the fact that he would say that he would gladly vote for Bernie Sanders ought to cast that depiction into serious question. Now, in the same clip, Joe went on and said that Tulsi is still his favorite. So like many people, he has a variety of preferences in terms of the candidates. And, liking Tulsi is not mutually exclusive with liking Bernie. I would put myself in the same category, even if I have criticism of Bernie, and I have some criticisms of Tulsi. That's just how it goes, especially with a presidential process that is insanely protracted. So the notion that you have to have one specific candidate that you're all or nothing on at this juncture in August of 2019 doesn't make any sense. But it also goes to show that you should not write off anyone based on a superficial and reductive characterization of their purported political views. Especially somebody like Joe Rogan, who obviously has a gigantic platform, By the way, his Bernie interview from last week has 8.5 million views last I checked, and that doesn't count the clips and the podcast downloads. So you could probably double or maybe even triple the overall count on the number of people who have consumed that interview. And so the idea that if you're on the left, right, and you want to persuade others to support your preferred candidates or to support your policy outcomes, then this idea that you're going to arbitrarily cocoon yourself off from people who might, not be avowed leftists, but still could be receptive to aspects of your argument and could be convinced through, rational discussion to endorse elements of your agenda. Of course, that should be something you should do, and the right ought to do it as well. I mean, anybody who is in the public arena and wants to try to rationally engage with others ought to just have that as their baseline assumption as what is proper for how you interact with democracy. And yet somehow that's become controversial over the past number of years. The idea that, to talk to somebody is to somehow endorse everything they've ever done. I mean, that's wholly destructive. And Bernie Sanders, better than anybody, kind of dispels that myth. And as far as Joe Rogan in particular, I mean, he, like many voters, I think has a variety of political instincts that probably doesn't spend all day, every day thinking about politics, therefore can't be neatly categorized into a specific ideological box. Right? So when you talk to voters around the country who don't immerse themselves in this 24/7, like I frankly do, often they'll tell you that their political preferences get developed through a sort of roundabout series of reactions to news events, of kind of scattershot accumulation of instincts that have a political tinge. And that doesn't mean that you're not intelligent if that's how you arrive at your preferences. It just means that it's not foremost in your mind, right? So you're going to just pick up bits and pieces of different debates and, policies that you might support, what have you. And that really, I think, is how a lot of people around the country come at their political preferences, which informs their voting behavior. So if somebody has an ostensibly right-wing opinion, doesn't mean that they are always and in every instance, right-wing in the sense that they've read books on right-wing philosophy, and it makes them like a stalwart, hardened right-winger, right? For a lot of people, it's kind of just a minor aspect of their overall life experience. So those people are always worth engaging, and I think Joe Rogan has proven that. All right, people. I'll talk to you later.